By the time Hitler seized absolute power, Germany was no longer just a nation. It had become his personal nightmare factory, his war machine. What followed was a reign of terror, built on lies, fueled by hate, and soaked in blood. That was a bit dramatic, but it is true. Anyway, once Hitler secured power, everything changed fast. Democracy, gone. Personal freedom, also gone. The Nazi regime quickly turned Germany into a totalitarian state. Teachers brainwashed the students, fear became a way of life. Every aspect of life was controlled by propaganda, fear, and violence. Free speech? You're right, also gone, not a thing anymore. If you criticized the regime, you would disappear overnight. And it wasn't just about silencing political opponents anymore. Hitler had much darker plans in mind. So, at the heart of the Nazi ideology was a twisted, racist belief in the Aryan supremacy. According to Hitler, Germans were the master race, and anyone who didn't fit that mold was considered a threat to society. Hitler first started with laws like the Nuremberg Law in 1935, which stripped Jews of their rights and made them second-class citizens. But it didn't stop there. What began with discrimination escalated into brutal violence. In November 1938, Nazis attacked Jewish homes, businesses and synagogues in a coordinated assault known as Kristallnacht, or the Night of the Broken Glass. Over 90 people were killed, and tens of thousands were sent to concentration camps. It was a terrifying warning of what was to come. Initially built for political opponents, concentration camps quickly became a tool for mass oppression. Communist, socialist, trade unionist, and anyone the Nazis disliked ended up there. Conditions were inhuman. Forced labor, starvation, and brutal punishment were the norm. The Nazis began systematically murdering people with disabilities. Under the guise of mercy killing, tens of thousands were gassed or given lethal injections. The camps grew larger, more organized, and deadlier. Prisoners were forced to build their own prisons. The SS experimented with mass killing methods, preparing for something more. The Nazi leadership began planning the systematic extermination of Europe's Jewish population, the Holocaust. Over 6 million Jewish were murdered in the most horrifying ways imaginable. Entire families were wiped out, entire communities erased. While the horrors unfolded at home, Hitler's ambition for global domination pushed Europe into full-scale war. In 1939, Germany invaded Poland, triggering World War II. And I am going to break the fourth wall here and say I am working on World War II videos, and it is looking fire. Literally. Anyway, it's gonna take a while, so yeah. Over the next few years, Nazi forces swept across Europe, crushing everything in their path. France fell in 6 weeks, Britain was bombed relentlessly. Hitler even made the brilliant decision to invade the Soviet Union in 1941, convinced it would be a quick victory. Because apparently he thought invading Russia in winter could end well. Pro tip, it never does. The war wasn't just fought on the front lines. Civilians paid a terrible price. Entire cities were reduced to rubble by the air raids. Millions of people was displaced, forced to leave everything behind to survive. By the mid-1940s, life in Nazi-occupied Europe was a nightmare for everyone who wasn't part of Hitler's vision for the perfect society. Fear and suffering were everywhere. In those occupied territories, things were even worse. Entire villages were wiped out. Millions were used as forced labor for the Nazi war machine, worked to death in brutal conditions. But by 1943, the tide of war had turned. The Battle of Stalingrad was a disaster for the Nazis, and the D-Day invasion in 1944 brought the fight to Hitler's doorstep. His once unstoppable war machine was falling apart. Hitler's empire was collapsing, but the horrors weren't over yet. As the Nazis realized they were losing, they doubled down on their brutality, escalating their efforts to wipe out entire populations before the Allies could stop them. By early 1945, Things were beyond grim. Hitler had become paranoid and delusional, refusing to leave his underground bunker in Berlin. While bombs rained down on the city, he spent his final moments issuing orders to armies that no longer existed, and blaming everyone but himself for the disaster. And by this point, even his closest allies were like, yeah, this is obviously not going great. April 1945, the Red Army was right outside Berlin, and everyone in the bunker knew the end was near. Some fled, others stayed. Hitler, he decided to go down with his sinking ship. In a twisted final act, Hitler married his longtime companion, Eva Braun, in the bunker. Less than 40 hours later, they both took their own lives. As per his instructions, their bodies were burned to prevent capture by the Soviets. The nightmare was over, but the scars remained.